the plan is I'll give some introductions here to our special guests that were nice enough to spend their time with us here. And then we're going to work through, I have it kind of broken into 5 sections. And the first section is just generally how the NCAA recruiting process really works. The second section is how to showcase your talent and get noticed. Third section are key skills, attributes, and academics that college coaches value. Fourth is the transition to college hockey. And then the fifth section will be some final thoughts, and hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A. So if you have those questions, just put them into that question box, and then I'll try to get to that at the end. So let me get to an introduction here. So first, Coach Andy Murray, he's coached at virtually every level of hockey, high school, juniors, college, the AHL, the NHL, overseas in Europe, and at the highest levels of international play, winning 3 world championships. It's an honor, and I thank you very much, Andy. It's an honor to have you here, such an accomplished professional coach joining us and giving us some insights into how to make it to the next level of hockey, to the college level. Along with Andy is his son, Jordy. Sorry, I could give you some time to talk there, Andy.
No, I was just going to say thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm nervous. I'm blasting through this whole thing. Along with Andy is his son, Jordy Murray. Jordy is currently an assistant coach at Michigan Tech, formerly part of the Notre Dame coaching staff. Before Jordy's coaching career began, he played 3 years at the University of Wisconsin, which led into an 8-year career playing professionally overseas. It was during this part of his career that we actually met. Jordy trained at PWHT, I think like the second half of your professional career. Is that fair?
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
And then actually he eventually became a part owner, which he still is today, which is why we have this awesome connection. So without further ado, we could get into questions here, unless you guys have something you wanted to start with.
No, excited to be here, Zach.
Great. Okay. So I'll just throw questions out, and you guys, if you want to one at a time, or if you both have things to add, we'll kind of have a free-for-all here. But the first question is just, can you give us a high-level overview of how the college recruiting process works from a coach's perspective? And then what are the biggest misconceptions that high school players have about the recruiting process?
Sure. I guess I'll start. I think there's some important ages and dates, age windows and dates that all parents should know. It's a little different on the women's side because there's no real junior hockey, although they can post grad and play another year after their last year of high school. But the window is age 15 to 21. The first time a college coach can talk to a recruitable athlete is January 1st of their sophomore year. So usually when they're 15 or 16 years old. And then the first time they can offer a potential student athlete is August 1st going into their junior year. So most of them are 16 or turning 17. And then there is junior hockey, which can start at really any time, 18, 19, 20. And then you can play until you're 21 years old, going into your 20th year. You can turn 21 that second half of that year. And after that, your clock starts. So you have to go into college that next year. So there's that window. I think a lot of a big misconception is, I have to commit when I'm 15, 16, or I have to be talking to all these schools when I'm really young. And the window's a lot bigger than I think a lot of people think. And I don't think there's any one year in that window that's bigger than the next year or another year. You're not going to make it or break it when you're 15 or 16. So I think that can take some pressure off it a little bit. I'd say, well, I guess I'll let my dad chime in a little bit if he has anything on.
You're doing a good job, Jordy. I'll just listen.
Good. I'll just talk about how we recruit at Tech because we do it a little differently. All schools are a little different. We don't go after everyone. We're pretty targeted and like to keep a small list. And we don't like overcommitting or, having to push kids or decommit kids at the end of the year, when they're supposed to be coming in. We can talk about that a little bit later. And we have a flexibility. We could add kids the year of or grab kids on the transfer portal. So there's reasons we don't recruit a ton of players, and we like to recruit older players that have usually played 1 year a junior or 2 years a junior. That's when we offer kids. We're recruiting and watching kids as early as 15, 16, but we're not a team that offers a ton of younger kids. There are exceptions, of course, but So we do it a little differently. There's some other schools, and then my dad can talk about his experience at Western, but that'll offer a lot of kids, August 1st, they're going into their junior year, and a lot of schools that'll offer or hold a bigger list where they'll have too many kids that can actually go into their school. So they might overcommit. And that doesn't, that usually leads to them decommitting kids down the road. So we try not to get into that. So there's definitely a lot of different ways schools can recruit. And my dad can talk about how they did it at Western.
Thanks, Jordy. Yeah, so I coached for 10 years at Western, been out of it now for 3 years, and already the college game has changed dramatically with the transfer portals and now major junior players being eligible to come in and play. But, I think the big thing, recruiting is the lifeline of any college hockey program. And you look at most of the best coaches in the country in college hockey are the greatest recruiters, and you have to work at it consistently. And I share the same philosophy as Jordy, in that we usually only start talking to a player when we have a definite interest in that player. And there's a lot of programs that I'll see young assistant coaches, and they'll be going and talking to a player, and be saying we're interested in you and so on. And I know that they've already got about 10 players overcommitted for the following year anyways, and they're talking to more players. So there's certainly, it's important to know the type of program you're talking to and the coaches and their philosophy. But yeah, I mean, it's the lifeline, and it has to be worked at. And certainly parents and advisors now, who are such a big part of the game as well at that level, they have to be all in believing the same things. And when that player is ready to come in and play. And that's the key thing for us at Western in running our program, was the idea that, if we committed to a player, that player was going to be a Bronco. We were not going to be decommitting from that player. I always said to our assistant coaches, they would sometimes complain about some of our recruits and they're not playing well right now with their junior teams or whatever. And I said, well, that's fine. We're not dropping that player. We're going to continue to have him come in, and then it's your job to make him better. That's why I hired you as assistant coaches. So it's important to have those values. And by the same token, the way that the college game works now, it's a two-sided street. I mean, players can, even though they're committed, can certainly get out of those commitments, don't have to go to the school that they committed to. And the same thing with schools now, with the transfer portal. And players go on that portal and they can pick any other school they want to go to. But there's lots of opportunities in college hockey and lots of programs. The one thing that I would say to any of the parents and any of the young athletes that are on here with us tonight is to make sure that whoever talks to you as a recruiter, and I don't care if it's a top Division I program, a program that's maybe not quite as strong, or a Division III program, talk to that coach, make that coach feel appreciated, because it could be by the time your recruiting process is done, you may be interested in one of those programs. And if you have shown no interest in them at all and no respect for them when they talk to you, they're going to simply write you off the list there. So it's very important to keep a broad list right now until the decision is finally made, and treat everybody with respect and fairness.
That's great. That's good advice there. One thing that you guys mentioned is the change to the junior leagues, and that's one of the questions that we had submitted. It was submitted a couple of times actually. And Jordy, you had mentioned that a lot of parents and kids have been asking you, can you give us a little bit of information on how the changes in the junior leagues and NCAA eligibility is changing how things are done?
Yeah, there's 3 leagues in Canada. The Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec Major Junior League, that were all considered by the NCAA professional leagues, and those players were not eligible to play college because they weren't amateurs. That rule was changed this November, so now those players, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there's close to 30 some teams, probably more than that, Dad. How many would you say in those leagues?
I'm not exactly sure either, but there's
There's
a
a
lot of teams, and one in the French-speaking part of Canada, the Quebec Junior League, and then you have the Ontario League, and then you have the Western Hockey League out in Western Canada, and not only in Western Canada, the Western United States and the Eastern United States. There are major junior teams now playing out of the United States who participate in the Canadian leagues.
So those players are all now eligible to play college, and none of these players thought they were going to be eligible. It was kind of there was talks about it, but yeah, everyone thought it was going to happen years down the road. And I think the NCAA was, they didn't want to get sued anymore, and so they decided just to grant them eligibility starting next year. So it really changed our recruiting plans. And this past year, we've been all over Canada, and those leagues are really, really good hockey leagues, and leagues that the parents and the kids on this call should look into. And I know a lot of these staffs on these leagues have hired U.S. scouts now that they're going to try and get a lot more Americans, and now that they can send these kids to college. And so, the perceived best league that could go into college was the USHL for years and years, and now this is like opening up 3 more USHLs in Canada. So it's really good hockey, and I think right now there's a lot of hype around it, and we're at Michigan Tech, we're grabbing potentially 7 players from those leagues next year. It's probably going to die down maybe a little bit and get more spread out, and but it's there's a lot of excitement right now, and a lot of, I guess, unknown too, how it's going to affect the player pool in the U.S. and because there's a lot more Canadians that are available. So
Sure. Yeah, and you might you might have just answered this question. Maybe it's unknown, but do you know, like, if I'm a high school kid that's watching this right now, do you know how this is going to affect me, or it's just not clear yet?
I think it's pretty clear now. All of the players, like the USHL, there's a draft, and the Western Hockey League teams, or the Ontario League or the Quebec League, they have scouts, and they've paid scouts. There's a number of them in Minnesota, and they're recruiting players, and not necessarily recruiting, but they're scouting, talking to them, getting to know the players better, so that when they have their draft day, just like the National Hockey League, that they can draft. No, the same thing happens in the USHL. The USHL has a draft too, or in major junior hockey in Canada. And again, there are teams in the United States that are in those leagues as well. You can also go to their camps, and you can sign as a non-drafted player as well too. So it's created a lot more opportunities for players to play junior hockey, and again, it's going to have somewhat of an impact on high school hockey in the sense that they're going to be coming after 16-year-old players. Their draft is actually for 14-year-olds. So you could probably be on the list a couple of years before you're eligible to play for that team. But they run it as a business. They obviously develop a lot of National Hockey League players who go right from that league and do not go to college and go on and play pro hockey as well. But now with this idea of being able to go to major junior, they're going to draw a lot of players in there to play.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
I think another thing, Zach, that it's just the player pool now that can play college hockey is just so much bigger, and I think it's could really increase, in my opinion, the level of college hockey and the parity in college hockey. And there's just more players. So, there's going to be some really good players that might not get the opportunities that they would have got in the past. And that's why developing and, becoming the best player you can be and putting yourself in the right positions is more important than ever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's going to affect all of the levels. Like, I think Division I hockey is going to be better because of it. Some of the teams that maybe there wasn't the high-end talent as much as needed to have all the teams on a level that's the same. Now these teams, there's more players out there that they can draw from as well. But it's also going to impact Division III hockey. And I'm a proponent of Division III hockey because in reality, after college hockey, about 98% percent of all college hockey players, whether they're playing Division I or they're playing Division III, they're looking for a job after their college career. So the key thing is to go to a place where you're going to play and have fun and enjoy your college experience. And you can be on a D3 campus like St. Mary's in Minnesota there, and you'll have the same experience over 4 years that a Division I player would have. Feel good about yourself because you're playing. In college hockey, as Jordy knows, you're only allowed to dress 20 players, and you carry 28 to 30 players on your roster. So it's highly competitive, and the pool is going to continue to go up, and it's going to be even more important that young athletes get involved with operations like yours there, Zach, where they're giving themselves the best chance to be noticed.
Awesome. Yeah, that it's all going to get even more competitive. That's crazy. Okay, I want to shift gears here to the second section here, which is how to showcase your talent and get noticed. And I want to start this a few years ago. Andy, I actually called you and I asked if you would want to come to a showcase. We were going to have a showcase for our athletes at PWHT. We were going to invite college coaches. This is when you were coaching at Western. And you told me that you've already seen everybody. And I was really surprised. I was kind of taken aback. And I think you said that, like, just to illustrate the point, you were like, there's a 14-year-old kid in like Kazakhstan or something like that. And you had just been watching video on him. And you were already at the point where you were making a decision on if you wanted to pursue him or not. And I tell that story all the time to parents because to me, it illustrates the point that if you're a good player, you're probably on coaches' radars. And so what I wanted to kind of draw some of that out of you guys. And when it comes to showcasing your talent and getting noticed, how does that work in college hockey? And then what are the qualities that coaches are looking for and we'll start just from a hockey skill, maybe position by position, D, forward, goalie, but what are you guys looking for when you're surveying talent?
You want me to start that, Jordy?
Sure.
So I've got and Jordy's heard it a number of times, and I think you have as well there, Zach. I have always had 6 points to me, and it was whether I was coaching in the National Hockey League with the Team Canada or in college or junior hockey. Because I called it evaluation criteria, and it's things that I was looking for in players, and also it's 6 questions. And the first question that I would like a player to answer and show us by the way he plays and conducts himself is, are you a good person? Like that's the most important thing on the evaluation criteria. If I'm looking at a player, or I'm looking at adding somebody to our team, or if I'm looking at a player that we already have on our roster that we recruited because we assumed he was that good person, we still have to hold him to that standard. So it's are you a good person? Are you somebody that people are comfortable being around? Are you a good teammate? Are you polite? Are you well-mannered? Do you shake somebody's hand and shake firmly and look them in the eye? And are you a really good person? Are you that person that opens doors for other people, is polite to teachers? And you find all these answers out by talking to teachers, by talking to teammates, by talking to opponents, opposing coaches, and so on. So the most important thing for me is to be a good person. And the one thing to remember is you can be a good person for 364 days of the year, and you screw up on that last day. And unfortunately, that's probably the reputation you're going to have for the next 5 years, is because you let that happen. You have to be on guard to be a good person all the time. The second thing is are you a good listener? And can you listen? Because in life, you can't get better unless you're prepared to listen. People tend to hear more when they know that you've been listening. So when it's your turn to speak, people are going to pay more attention to you because you, first of all, went into the room, you sat there, you listened, absorbed, you listened to leadership, and you showed respect. But I want players that, are you a good listener? The third thing is are you a hard worker? And people talk about character, competitiveness, or whatever. Are you a hard worker? And, for all the parents that are on, when we were playing sports, it was always, we need more second effort, second effort. Well, we can find lots of players with second effort these days, or third effort. Are you somebody that can go to the fourth or fifth gear in terms of effort? And there's hard work, there's hard work, and there's hard work. And there's a difference. There's a difference in the way that players work. And some players get it, and that's something that distinguishes them. So we want hard workers. Can you play fast? That's a question mark. I'm asking you, Zach, can you play fast? I mean, is it, and it's not how fast you can skate. It's how fast you play. Can you process the game? People might say it's hockey sense. Well, that allows you to play fast because you move the puck quick. You're a defenseman that can get it, make a pivot, and get it on somebody's stick and accelerate the game forward. So can you play fast? It can be obviously speed in terms of skating as well, but that's such a big part of the game right now at every level is the speed of the game. Can you play on the inside? Can you play on the inside of the game? I don't need to know if you can fight or not, or if you're a big hitter all the time, but are you going to go into the tough areas between the dots? Are you going to stand in front of the net to tip a shot or screen or deflect? Are you going to take punishment? Are you going to block a shot as a defenseman to save your team a goal? Are you going to make sure that you're competing every loose puck in the corner? Can you play between the dots? And the last thing is can you make the play? There's people watching you. And the recruiting process for college hockey starts the day you step on the ice, whether you're 5 years old or 6 years old. There's always somebody watching you, and you never know who that might be. And you get a bit of a reputation that continues to go forward, and people hear that name and they notice it and so on. But ultimately, if you're a centerman, can you win the big faceoff? Or if you're a goaltender, can you make the big save? If you're a defenseman, can you get the puck off the glass and clear the zone if it's necessary, making a simple play? If you got the puck in the spot and your team's down a goal, there's about 15 seconds left in the game, can you put the puck under the bar and score? So can you make the play? So those are the 6 things, whether you're playing at any level, that I think coaches are looking for. And the key thing to remember is the recruiting process doesn't start when you're 16 years of age or 15 or 14. It starts from the first time you step on the ice and you learn to play the game and the habits that you bring to the game on a daily basis. And I think it's something that we miss sometimes, is that young athletes don't realize that you're being evaluated every time you step on the ice. You go to practice to get better. You have to be there, don't you? You have to go to practice. Coach says we're practicing at 4:00. You got to show up at 4:00. Well, go there with a purpose in mind, get better. You're going to work on something today that's going to make you better.
Just for the record, I cannot play fast.
Okay.
That's
I think
Jordy
I saw that
on
one.
the ice.
I
And
think I saw that once, yeah.
yeah, it's not a good look. Jordy, what do you have? What are you looking
Yeah.
for?
I'll just talk maybe how we categorize like forwards. We can get into D and goalies. I'm not a goalie guy, but first of all, I think what my dad said, those first 3 things are the most important. If they're not a good person or a good teammate, we won't even recruit them, right? If it doesn't matter how much they would help us on the ice, if they hurt our locker room, it's just not worth it. So we will ask, we will talk to their parents, we will talk to their coaches. We will talk to teammates if we can, and that's all just part of the recruiting process. And that's got to be the first thing, the most important thing. And if they don't check that, we don't even really move on to the next. But for us, when we recruit forwards, we categorize, and we do it with our players on our team right now. We categorize forwards in 3 ways, and there's kind of a 4th too. But you're either a skill forward, so you're someone who can be reliable to put up points and produce for the team. You're a forechecking forward or an energy player, or you're a size strength forward. The other one would be defensive ability, but we do think we can teach defense. So when we're recruiting, those are the 3 things: skill, forechecking, and size strength. And for us, we don't think we can have too many pure skill guys on a team. You just can't have a ton of success if everyone wants the puck and everyone's trying to play a certain way, a skill way. We haven't had success that way. And so what we're really looking for is a player that can fill multiple categories. So they can have multiple elements. So they have a skill element, right? They can make the plays when they're needed to, like my dad said. But they also have great energy. They can get in on the forecheck. They can win their battles. And then size strength, I wasn't blessed with size strength, but some players are, and they can really help you defend and, get pucks, from the net front or in the corners. And so if we can find a player that fills at least two of those three, that's great. If we can find someone with all three, that's fantastic. It's rare, but that's what we're looking for. And one thing I'd say is a lot of players just want to be a skill player when you're younger and just work on skill, and that's what they really value. And it's really tough to be a pure skill player. You have to be, a 60-point guy in college, or you have to be a high production player. And just because you're a skill player in high school doesn't mean at that next level you're going to be a skill player. So I'd recommend to all players and parents watching is to really help their kids and kids develop a second side to your game. Because just because you're skilled in high school doesn't mean you're going to be skilled in juniors, and it might not mean you're that skilled player counted on top six when you get to college. So it's always good to be well-rounded, and you might not always have your A game every time you show up, and you might not be able to get on the score sheet, but how can you impact the game and help your team in other ways? And so we really think, especially our brand of hockey, Michigan Tech, and how we've been successful is we really lean towards the forechecking and power forwards. And then we need to sprinkle in skill because you need to score some goals. So we try to find a good mix, and that's same with our D and then goalies. We just need them to stop the puck, really. So.
Sure. So, okay. So one of the questions that we had submitted was how important is like production at the high school level? Is that something that you're scanning through lists and looking at point production, or is that secondary?
I'd say it is really important because that shows that you can make plays, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have that same production when you get to the next level, but you'll have the ability to make a play on a breakout or make a play in the neutral zone. There's a certain skill level you need to play at the next level. And if you have that skill level, you're probably producing in high school. I would say that's not the only thing. There's lots of other things, but it is important and something we definitely look at. What would you say?
The other thing, Zach, as Jordy knows, like every game that every high school team plays, every game that every Bantam team plays pretty well around the world now, coaches get it and can watch it. We've all got programs on our computers where if the Edina Pee-wees are playing on a certain night, we can watch that game. So, and certainly when you're seeing people that are accumulating some points and helping their team offensively, that does make a difference.
Okay, that's super interesting. I don't know how many people know that. So
that's why I say you need to be good all the time. You don't know who's watching you, and we've recruited players at Western that we watched them play, got a jump on some of the other programs, and by the time the other programs got onto this player, he was already committed to us. So it's important to know that at practices, I enjoy going to practices and watching players how they conduct themselves in practice, or in summer sessions, skating sessions, and so on. Working out with people like you, Zach, it's important to get a read on the players at an early age.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One of the questions we get a lot is, should I go to this invitational tournament? Should I do this for exposure? And a lot of parents talk about needing to get exposure. Is that something that's worth doing, going to those tournaments for exposure, or do you think that you have enough film, you see them in their high school leagues and association?
Yeah, I think if you're playing at a Minnesota high school or like John Drager's team in Sioux Falls, midget tier 1, like you're definitely getting enough exposure through those things. Certainly there's some junior camps that I'll go to in the summer, it's USHL camps and things where I can see players live. But like my dad said, like we have access to games and it's already broken down into shifts. And a lot of times it's broken into scoring chances and offensive entries and all these things that we can just filter through and watch a player. And so we can get as much video as we want on pretty much any player in most leagues.
I actually, and I would agree with Jordy there. Obviously, the college programs are going out and scouting the North American Junior League camps and the USHL camps. Now they'll be in the summer, and they'll be scouting the major junior camps in Canada and that as well too. But I believe that training in the summer is the most important thing. Adding muscle mass, power, getting quicker. Doing all the things that you guys are professionals at doing, Zach, with your group there. To me, that's far more important than going to a camp. And, I've talked to a number of players who would be sitting across the desk from me with their parents. And at Western, whoever wanted to come and visit our school, we had them come in. I did, whether they were on our list or not, we wanted them to come in because we wanted them as students at our school. We wanted them to come there as students if they didn't necessarily come as hockey players. So, but the key thing I would listen to this young man and the parents, and they'd be saying, yeah, he's going to this tournament in Boston. He's going to this showcase in Philadelphia. He's doing this. And his whole summer was planned out with showcases. And I said, well, he needs to get stronger. He needs to get more powerful in his stride. And the only way you can do that is to be working off ice, supplemented with some on ice sessions as well for technique. Because sometimes I think players go 3 months without skating, and you can't do that because you've got that new muscle mass and weight, and so on. You got to get used to adjusting as you go along to the power that you have. But I would far rather parents invested their money and so on and developing the players in summer programs rather than going to, because the colleges know all the players. There's very few that slip through the cracks, and that they know who you are for the most part by the time you're probably 13 or 14 years of age.
Oh, and I didn't even pay him to say that. That's incredible. It did strike me a few years ago though, when you said that it wouldn't even be worth the time to come see the kids because you knew them all. That blew my mind. One of the questions that we get a lot is advisors. What's the role that advisors play? What point should you get an advisor? Should you get an advisor? One of the things that some of the questions about advisors are, how do I reach out to a coach? Should I be reaching out to a coach? Should I be doing that through an advisor? If you guys could touch on your thoughts on advisors and the role that they play, that would be great.
Sure. I'll talk about the advisors. I think their role is really to, try to promote their players and promote them to colleges or get them to junior camps, get them invites to these camps. I don't know if they're completely necessary, especially when you're 15, 16 years old. They might be able to get you into certain things or connect you with people, but I would say they're definitely not necessary, especially if they work with people at PWHT. And I know when we were working there, we would help as advisors and tell kids if a exposure tournament was worth it or if a junior camp was worth it. And that's kind of their secondary role, is to lend help and, answer questions that parents have throughout the whole recruiting process. And
I don't know legally if we've ever been advisors. We've given people advice about hockey.
Yeah. Advisors. Yeah. But I will say when you get older, I deal with advisors all the time. And so I do think it's probably changed a little bit. Maybe my dad might have a different opinion, but once you get older and you're really talking to a lot of schools, I think it is good to maybe look into having an advisor who's well connected and can be a really good advocate for you. And there are some good ones in Minnesota, and then there's a lot of people that just don't know coaches and say they do. And so you got to vet them really well and make sure it's worth what you're paying for sure.
It's the same thing, Zach, as anything. There's good advisors, and there's advisors that are not as good. And certainly, I think at any age, if you have a family situation where the family's maybe not familiar with the process and so on, of how you move on through the different levels and so on, and just somebody that maybe has a strong background in the game and maybe technically that could say you need to work on this to improve your game and so on. I really don't think they're necessary in terms of at younger ages, in terms of making contact with colleges. As I said, the colleges know you already. They've already been out watching. They added another coach to all of the college coaching staffs a year ago. So now there's 3 full-time assistants plus a whole bunch of about 12 other coaches that are just friends of the program that kind of give you alumni and so on. But yeah, I think once you maybe get to a certain level, helping distinguish between the schools and having good contact, and there's and it's the same thing as agents. I mean, they're basically all agents like the National Hockey League guys have, but there's certain agents in the NHL that if a general manager gets a call from this agent, he's going to take the call. There's other agents that call him that he'll tell his secretary, tell him I'm busy, I don't have time right now. And so you need to have a good one. You need to have one that's got a reputation of having players that have gone on to play Division I, and playing players that have gone on to play junior and so on. So I think it's you need to do the homework on the player, on the person that's looking to be the advisor. Is he somebody that has a record of success? And again, it's the same type of thing. If you're a good player, usually they're all talking to you and want you to join their company and so on as well. So you'll probably be approached. I don't know if it's the same thing. I don't think good player. I don't think Wayne Gretzky ever needed an agent. I mean, I think if you're a good player, you probably don't need them. You only need somebody to negotiate your contract. But yeah, I mean, I think they certainly serve a purpose. And there were certain ones that if they called us when I was at Western, I would take the call because I knew he has good players. He represents good players. So if you're getting an advisor, you want to go to somebody that's got a reputation.
Sure.
I would
That's
say
good.
just to make sure the agent has your best interest. A lot of agents that I talk to or that I've dealt with, they like to send their players to schools that have bigger logos or bigger schools, and it might not be in the best interest of the kid. Like my dad said, there only 20 players play. You want to go where you're going to have the best opportunity, and make sure that the agent is thinking aligned with you. Like you want to go somewhere where you're going to play, and it doesn't matter necessarily how big the school is or the branding of it. Like go where you're going to play and get opportunity and develop and grow your game. And so make sure you have an agent has your best interest for sure.
That's a good point, Jordy, because a number of agents like to have association with certain, be able to say they send players to these schools. Well, if those players don't play at those schools, it's not helping the player, and ultimately it's not going to help the agent either, or the advisor. Pardon me.
So is it fair to say that the best way to maybe do your homework on the agent or the advisor would be to ask them for maybe a list of players that they've sent on, and then kind of look at how that panned out for them?
I think that's certainly one way of doing it, and yeah, you need to know who they've helped in the past and what the success rate has been there. So, and again, there are certain people that are advisors that charge a fee so much a month, and what they do is they watch the player play, and then they advise them on what he can do better in the game and so on. And I think that serves a purpose for certain players and families that maybe don't have the knowledge that we all think we have being in Minnesota. There, I have a home in Minnesota as well too. So that whether Canada invented the game or we invented it in Minnesota, I'm not sure, but there's a battle there. But it's important to know that there's a track record for the advisor.
Sure.
The other
Cool.
thing I'd be pushing is your high school coach should be an advocate for you as well. They should be reaching out to teams and helping you make connections with because junior coaches call them. They have connections with junior teams and they have connections with college teams, and they should also help promote their players. That's part of their job.
Sure. Cool. Excellent. What about so we talked a little bit about what you're looking for on ice. What are the the off ice, maybe academic areas that coaches are looking at, what are the incentives for coaches when it comes to the academic side of things, and what are the mistakes that players could potentially be making?
Zach, could I make just a quick comment again on the idea of the role of coaches and
Yeah.
recruiting players and so on? And we'll come back to the academic part, which is obviously very important. But it's the players that earn the opportunities to go on to the next level, whether it's from high school to junior to college. And as I always tell young coaches, do a good job where you are and you'll get noticed. And the key thing is not to get too far ahead of the process. Like you're with a high school team, do the best job you can for your high school team, and it should be recognized. Do a good job with your and don't. It's not the coach's fault if that opportunity is not there for you. It's the players that earn their right to move to the next level because of what they've done. So do a good job where you are. Don't worry about other things ahead of you. That will happen if you're doing a good job where you are. Young coaches, don't worry about coaching a college team when you're coaching a Bantam team in a diner or whatever. I mean, do a good job and you'll get noticed. If you don't do a good job where you are, it doesn't matter anyway. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Jordy, you want to go on the academic side of things?
Yeah, I think there's two real academic standards you have to meet to get into play Division I hockey. You have to meet the NCAA Eligibility Center, which is something you have to apply to, and most kids, we can talk about this later, apply to it as juniors, and you have to have a certain criteria to get through that, which isn't super hard. And then depending on which school you go to, you have to meet their criteria to get accepted into their school. And there is some flexibility sometimes with student athletes, where you can get in and not have maybe as high a GPA as a regular student, but there's a lot of schools that don't have any flexibility. So what I say to student athletes is why limit yourself at all? Like, keep up with your schoolwork, do right from freshman year, because that's when it starts to count. Do a really good job and keep all your options open, because you never know down the road. You don't want to cut your college options in half just by not keeping up with your schoolwork and having a poor GPA.
That makes perfect sense. Do you want to expand on what was the first part that you were talking about, the NCAA?
Yeah, so when you're applying to, or you decide you want to play Division I hockey, you have to apply to the NCAA, and they have to grant you eligibility academically, and then as a amateur athlete. So there's two things you have to fill out, and you have to turn in your high school transcript, and they look at your core courses and see if you meet a certain GPA. And I think it's a 2.5, or that's my recollection. So it's not super hard to get through the NCAA. It's when you're applying to schools is when it can become quite a bit harder, depending on the institution. But that is something that I don't know if a lot of parents know, that you do have to apply to the NCAA, and most students apply when they're juniors in high school, and that's when you can go on after you get an NCAA number, you can go on official visits to campuses, and you can get offered and accept offers. And so that is another step in the process. But academically, I think it's just as important as your on ice performance if you want to get noticed and have as many options as you can have.
It's I think that, and Jordy made an excellent point there, Zach. It's cumulative GPA. So your freshman year in high school is just as important as your senior year. You have to make sure that you get good grades as you're going through the process. And obviously, if you've had a tougher freshman year, you're going to have to pick it up a little bit to make up for that. But it's a cumulative GPA, and some young athletes at that age in particular sometimes don't realize how important the academic part is. And I always found in the players that we were recruiting that the ones that were the better students were also our better players, because they seemed to be more focused. They seemed to be able to manage their time better and realize that there's a process that you need to follow to be successful at anything, and that's to make sure you take care of the details. But academics are huge, and keep all your options open by getting high grades through high school, because that opens up. There's 62 Division I schools and a number of Division III, and a number of Division III schools have high academic demands and are real good academic institutions as well. And you have to make sure you take care of it. I'm somebody that is not a big believer that you have to go to Harvard or you can go to different schools, because ultimately it's what you do after you've got your degree that makes a difference. There's maybe a little bit of a heads up by going to certain schools, but I don't get hung up in that, because I think that it's what you do after you've got your degree in life that's going to make the difference.
That makes a lot of sense. The idea of just keeping your options open. I feel like, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking through the college hockey programs, and a lot of them have pretty high standards. I imagine that they're not very flexible on. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about so we've been talking a lot about college hockey, but most players are going to make the step to juniors first. And so I think the questions that I get the most, and you can fill in wherever I'm missing here, but the questions I get the most are, one, how do you know which juniors league you should go to? Are there rankings of juniors leagues and that kind of thing? And that's all been kind of thrown into chaos here. And then two is, when do you leave? And that's kind of a unique question in Minnesota hockey. But if you want to talk about the immediate next step of juniors, keeping those two questions in mind, I think that'd be helpful.
Like my dad said earlier, the USHL has a draft. I think it is after your freshman year of high school. And then there is now drafts. Now you can be drafted, or you could always have been drafted into the CHL, those leagues up in Canada. But now they're eligible to play college. They're going to be drafting a lot more Americans, and Americans are going to have a lot more interest in them. So I think you'll have the top players who get drafted will probably be invited to camps. Their freshman, sophomore year, and they can go and get a taste of what it's like. For the players that don't get drafted, I think, like my dad said earlier, I wouldn't go chasing camps when you're, 16, even 17 years old. Like, when I go out and watch these USHL camps in the summer, and I see a kid who, I go to the first camp June 1st, and then I'll go to like 5 consecutive camps, and I see the same kid at every camp. And by the time that last camp, even if he's a really good player and I liked him in that first camp, usually by the 5th camp, he's so exhausted. And that's my last impression of the kid. And they don't get their development in. And I think it's good when you're maybe 17 years old, your junior summer, to go try one USHL camp or an NAHL camp to see the level and get some experience and comfort playing in a junior camp, because it is high intensity. I mean, guys are there to make teams. So I think that's good. I wouldn't do more than one that year. And then maybe your senior year is when you would do a couple, because you're got to make a team that year. But so I'd start thinking about it. If you don't get drafted, I'd start thinking about it that junior summer, and then obviously your senior year.
That's perfect. That is what a lot of players get caught up in, going to tons and tons of camps all throughout high school. What about the level of the leagues? How should a player kind of figure out where they should be trying to fit in?
The teams will let you know.
All right.
And their interest in you as a player will indicate which would be a good fit for you. And certainly there are a lot of players that go to college hockey out of the North American Junior Hockey League. The primary route is normally has been through the USHL, and the USHL is not going to stand still and let these leagues in Canada steal all the good players. I mean, the USHL is still a very, very good league, and will continue to be that. In fact, Jordy's watched a lot of games in both major junior and USHL. And Jordy, you've said a number of times that you know, some of the games you saw in the USHL were better than the ones you saw in the major junior leagues. And I think there's probably in the USHL, there's probably 2.5 lines that are really good, and maybe 4 defensemen, where major junior probably has a little more depth in terms of maybe having 3.5 good lines and 5 good defensemen. But I mean, it's usually it's the teams that will let you know and the interest that they have in you and so on. The other thing that doesn't need to be forgotten is the success of the Minnesota high school program. And I think since they've added the elite league, it's made a huge difference. I think there was a time there where the quality of the U.S. players in high school was dropping off simply because there were not enough games to be played. But I think with the addition of the elite league before the high school leagues start, I think that's been good. The other thing that the USHL has been good at is letting players play before the high school season starts. And then once the high school season ends in February, letting these players come back and play junior as well. So I don't think we should forget the Minnesota High School League, because there's a lot of great players have come through that. It's just difficult now to go from high school to Division I college hockey. Rarely happens. And I would almost be at the point of saying, as a coach, whether the player was close to playing or not, I would tell that player, rather than going right from high school, you need to go play junior. And, you know, it's the kind of thing, even in junior, how many years do you play? If you play until you're ready to go to Division I. If it's 3 years of junior hockey, and that's what the college coach that's recruiting you says to you, and your advisor recommends the same thing, and the family's on the same wavelength, then you do that. Our commitment when I was the coach at Western was that, and parents would say, well, when are you going to bring them in? We're committing to you now as a 16-year-old. When are you going to bring him in? And I would say, whenever he's ready to play. You know, I don't like the idea you see in certain college recruiting sites where it lists this player going in 2023 or whatever, and the player wasn't ready to go in, so he played a couple more years of junior hockey. Our commitment was that you're going to be a Bronco, but you're going to come when you're ready to play, because there's no way that you should be bringing a player in that's not going to be in your lineup. You want somebody that's challenged to be a regular all the time. So I think that's important, is knowing when it's time to go. And some players just push the envelope too much, and they want to go to college too early, and they end up going there, and they're one of the players from 21 to 28 that don't get to play.
I would echo that. I would say, yeah, basically what my dad said. I wouldn't chase a specific league. I'd be chasing an opportunity. I'd rather personally go after a player who's, you know, producing and playing a lot in the North American League versus a fourth liner who's not playing at all in the USHL. So I'd make sure it depends on the age too. Like if I'm a younger player, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get my puck touches, get my opportunity, play on the power play, versus just trying to play in the best league I can possibly play in and maybe not play a ton. So I wouldn't, and that's just the same as, you know, trying to go in maybe before you're ready to a school that is promising you. Like go in when you're ready, go to the league that you're going to develop in, and don't chase after the best leagues, right? Chase after the best opportunity.
Yeah, maybe to start summarizing here a little bit, but this is mostly from what you guys have told me over the last however many years. The way we talk about it with families is you want to go somewhere where you're going to be a top 6 or a top 4. And you got to talk to your coach ahead of time. And as they're pursuing you and you're pursuing them, that kind of thing, you want to be somewhere you're going to play, it sounds like. And from what you guys have been saying throughout this and throughout our entire relationships, it seems like if you're chasing hockey, that's a bad position to be in, because it seems like, you know, when it comes to juniors team, when it comes to a college coach, when it comes to when to go in, that kind of stuff, that message is going to be pretty clear. It sounds like, you know, coaches already see you. Is that fair, do you think?
I think 100%. I think what my dad said, be in the present, do the best you can on your high school team right now. Everything will come if you do a really good job and you develop and grow your game and yeah, practice hard every day and push your teammates. And, you know, if you make your teammates better and you guys play in bigger games and maybe make it to the state tournament, you're going to get more eyes on you. So I'd say, yeah, stay where you're at right now and things will come if you do the right thing.
I call it the DWD. And the DWD, the D stands for do what you're supposed to do as a player, like practice hard, play hard, compete hard, follow the structure that your coaches give you. So do what you're supposed to do. And the second part is when you're supposed to do it. You know, like get things done. If you've got academics and you've got a test that you're going to be writing or an assignment, get it in on time. So, you know, do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And then the other D word is do it that way all the time. Be consistent. Be somebody that people can trust and can rely on. And you know, everything matters. Everything you do matters. The way you look at people, the way you come to practice, and the way that you approach the games and so on. Be that kind of person that can be counted on, because hope isn't a strategy. I mean, hoping that you're going to make it or hoping you're going to do that, you got to grasp it and make it happen yourself.
That's great. Yeah, that's be in the present, be developing, be working on your game now. That's excellent. Okay, we're coming right up here on time. I think, and maybe that might have been a good ending there, but what about just a general, what's the biggest mistake that you see or a common mistake that you see from players? Is there, or anything that we've left unturned that you wanted to get to?
I guess I would just reemphasize the window that you have. And don't worry if you have, my dad is right when he says you never know when someone's watching and you want to be consistent and play your best all the time. But if you have a bad game or you have a bad showcase or you're injured during the year and you aren't seen by people, it's not over. Like you have 5 years, like you need to make the most of each year. But if you have a bad shift, it's not going to end your college recruiting, right? You just got to pick yourself up and keep developing and growing. And if you do that, you know, it might not work for that team that came to watch you that night, but it might work for someone else. So I would say don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to always be at your best. And if you make a mistake, it's over. Like it's a long window, all right? And the most important thing, especially early in the window, is development and staying in the present. And then things will come if you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we've kind of talked about being in the moment. Whether you go on and play college hockey or you go on and play junior or pro hockey, as long as you've invested everything into it and you worked hard at it and you don't have any regrets, the key thing is giving yourself the best opportunity. And you know, you've got parents that have been supporting you as a son or a daughter and taking you to practices at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings when they probably got other things they'd like to be doing and so on. And, you know, it's important that you take advantage of the opportunities that you have in front of you. You know, it doesn't matter where you ultimately end up. It's following the process and you know, you may be great at something. Your hockey may not be the path for you, but you're going to be great at something because you had the discipline and commitment to make sure that you got everything out of your hockey career that you could get. And, you know, whether it's training in the summer and the whole process here. And the other thing is, the important thing is for the parents to keep things in perspective as well too. I mean, I know there's, we had players at Western we did not bring into the program because we didn't think we could deal with the father. And so there's a role that the parents play as well there too. And that's important to know how influential you are on the path that your son or your daughter is going to follow.
That's perfect. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the time. We'll try to get out of here right on time. Yeah, thanks so much. This was awesome. That was really eye-opening for me. I learned a ton. I hope everybody watching did as well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, take care, fellas.